a skilled workforce capable of driving the industry forward. Through educational programs, vocational training, international partnerships, we can go further. Again, Kenya's Taifa 1 satellite project, which involved significant contributions from local researchers, is a positive example of leveraging domestic talent for space initiatives. However, to mitigate brain drain, we must create competitive local opportunities and foster a culture of innovation. The last thing I would like to bring up is the issue of policy cohesion, one of my favorite topics. How do we harmonize regulatory frameworks and international cooperation? It's not an easy task, but it's an essential one, especially in the current environment and geopolitical challenges that the world faces today. Harmonizing regulatory frameworks across the continent is essential for smooth implementation. The African Space Policy and Strategy aims to unify space-related regulations, but varying national policies and legal standards can impede progress. The African Space Agency, headquartered in Cairo, is tasked with coordinating these efforts, but more needs to be done to ensure consistent and cohesive regulations. Would a Pan-African policy initiative be in the making? Should it be one of the key topics discussed here during the coming panels, and definitely during this panel, perhaps this could be one of the ways forward. And definitely one of the topics that the UN Science Policy Business Forum will build towards as we talk about space and sustainability during the African Ministerial Conference for the Environment later in the year. International cooperation is another critical element. Strategic partnerships allow for the sharing of knowledge, technology, and resources. And we are all aware that international alliances can bolster local space capabilities. But again, the geopolitical divides could impede these efforts and impede progress. What kind of strategies need to be put in place in order to avoid such impediments? In conclusion, I would just like to say that bridging the gap between policy and implementation in Africa's space industry requires a multifaceted approach, which I hope this panel will tackle. Substantial investments in infrastructure, human capital development, regulatory harmonization, international cooperation, and the strategic use of space technologies for sustainable development. By addressing these areas, Africa can transform its ambitious space policies into concrete achievements, positioning itself as a significant player in the global space. And as I end, I want to say that one element in the agenda that we would like to see in the next space meeting organized by the Kenya Space Agency is the issue of space debris. We need a greener and more sustainable space operation up there, because there is too much debris already and very little policy to regulate it. Thank you all very much.
Can we continue to give Ms. Shireen Zorba another round of applause? Let's give her a round of applause until she gets back. Thank you so much. I think, Shireen, I'm as excited as you to hear what the panel will talk about, to tackle this multifaceted approach and to bridge that gap with everything that we need to do. Without much further ado, I'd actually like us to jump into that panel because we're already excited. This is a perfect opening for it, and the gentleman who is going to come and moderate that needs no introduction. One, because everybody on earth knows him, and two, because we actually introduced him about an hour ago. I won't talk much, just to know that Ambassador Philip Thigo is going to give us a fantastic time, because I think we all really thoroughly appreciated his presentation. Please put your hands together again for Ambassador Philip Thigo, the Special Envoy on Technology, Office of the President, to take us through the very next session until he gets to his seat. Fantastic. Karibu Balozi.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I don't know why everybody's sitting on this side, so let me also sit on this side. Quickly, in the interest of time, I think the panel's title is very clear. Let me quickly invite my panelists, Emmanuel Kimeo from the Ministry of ICT, representing the PS, and choose anywhere to sit. Dr. Emmanuel Kurunsinza, my good friend, DG at the RCMRD. Mr. Lokan Serha, Joint Secretary in Space, Department of Space from India. Of course, Engineer Mugoki Bhatti, CEO at Telkom, Kenya, and Martin Anderson, the Head of Infrastructure and Energy Section at the delegation of the European Commission. I'm going to really help you. I'm going to really request you to help me land this plane. We have 40 minutes to get to Mombasa. It's a 1-hour flight, but we have 40 minutes. Thank you so much for helping get that seat. I think Shireen has given us a good context, but I think you asked more questions than answers. Potentially, I think it's because this is really emblematic of where we are in space, that it's new, we are having more questions. Technology has disrupted who's had a 200-year space program, who's had a 20-year program. I think space has really democratized. But I think what Shireen raises is a couple of fundamental issues around, do we need a continental approach? Do we need a harmonized way that we need to do this? Where is everybody? Is everybody involved in terms of multiple stakeholders? Are we investing enough? Do we have the right capacity? And then are we using space strategically? Because it's not about just going to the moon. It's also about ensuring that space benefits society, and to the core of what this panel is. And I think, to my point, let me start with Kimeo, maybe to put you in the fire a bit. It seems like we all agreed. I've not had a dissenting voice from the morning to now that clearly everybody gets space and they get the benefits of it. So why are we having this conference? What is missing to the extent of, do we have enough incentives? Do we need more incentives? How do we get this sector running when we're all agreed that it is important?
Thank you, Ambassador Tigo. And yeah, the question is, we have the policy, everybody knows we need the space, but why isn't it kicking? That's the big question. And when I look at it, it's more about advocacy. How many people know that the Kenya Space Agency exists in Kenya? We need to be more public-facing, because if we are not public-facing, you'll see Kenyans here going to launch satellites in Japan, in the US. Why aren't we launching them here? What we'd learn to see is more collaboration between the agency and the private sector, between the agency and fellow agencies like the National Research Foundation, like the Kenya National Innovation Agency, all who are encouraging innovation in technology and who are encouraging research in technology. Also, we have private research companies that would like maybe to put something in Taifa or somewhere there. How do we help them as an agency? My wish would, if in the next 3-4 years, we would see a Kenyan Elon Musk. Ambassador Thigo mentioned today, Kenya is best positioned to launch satellites. Why aren't we launching? Let's encourage one another. Let's encourage the space agency to be more public-looking. Yes, there's what we do for our defense, there's what we do for our security services, but let's open a space for public-private partnership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And I think you mentioned an important point to the extent, and I think this is something that the DG agreed with us a couple of years ago, is that space 80% is civilian and 20% is military. So there's really a lot of applications that we need to sort of ensure that citizens can see the benefit of it. But also I think, as you know, space sometimes is really about rocket science. So issues around advocacy, but I think this is where collaboration comes in, and I'm going to Emmanuel, Dr. Nkurunziza for this one, is your namesake talks about collaboration, talks about how do we ensure that this ecosystem then becomes fit for purpose, but then delivers in the sector, because everything seems to be there. So how do we facilitate collaboration to the extent of innovation? knowledge collaboration? And what support systems do we need to put in place to make that happen?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tigo. Let me start, first of all, by congratulating my brother, Brigadier Kip Koskei, for this wonderful function. I think building on what my colleague has just said, this space agency has done incredible work over a very short period of time. I come from a regional organization that brings together 20 countries, so I have an opportunity to see what is happening across the continent and what countries are trying to do. So Kenya Space Agency is one of the young agencies, but what it has achieved within a short period of time is quite commendable. And I wish really to take that as a positive in terms of what we are trying to do. Also, maybe to comment on what was raised by the keynote address on what is happening at continental level. There are initiatives at the continental level. We have an Africa space policy and strategy through which the space agency is being formed. So we can only support those initiatives, but they are already there, and they are anchored on the Agenda 2063, which looks at the prosperous continent, and space is one of the pillars that are seen to drive the continent. But straight to the question posed to me, I think I again draw to the wonderful keynote addresses by Ambassador Tigo and Zoba, because they both point out what space can give us, but also what the gaps are. And I think you all came to one key thing: investment. And investment could be in various things. I'll just come to one key: investment in human capital. I think sometimes when we look at the few people, the few experts we have, we feel we are there in terms of human capital. But I can tell you it is one of the biggest game changers that we can invest in, not so much, but achieve a lot more. And I think the ambassador from India gave us a good example of how they have achieved the successes they have. He said high science, low finance. So I believe if we also invest more in developing the science, developing the human capital, we can be able to achieve more before we get huge sums of money that we can invest in many other things. So I know Kenya has invested a lot in improving the innovation ecosystem. You mentioned the Kenya Innovation Agency, where the policy exists. But overall, I think even within the space sector, being deliberate and have clear innovation strategy that tackles all these elements and sees how we invest in them would be able to help to drive this forward. I think if you look at the recent Global Innovation Index, one of the areas where, unfortunately, Kenya is ranked lowest is on human capital and research. I think around 119 out of 140 countries. So that's really an area that points to where we should invest. So we have the people, very brainy young people who are willing to learn and willing to contribute to their countries. All they need is provide the right environment for them to be able to do that. But I think, again, to your keynote address, it's not enough to invest in developing human capital if we do not have retention measures. Because there are many young people, again, on our streets who have some skills, but we are not able to uptake. So look at investing in human capital, but also invest downstream. Where do we put these young people? And that brings in the private sector, the startups, the startup ecosystems. So the whole chain can be looked at, but I think the future is bright. And the platform which the space agency has said is quite encouraging, and I wish to encourage my brother to keep the good work he's doing. Thank you very much.
So much. And I think I take from your point, actually invest in what matters, invest in people first, and then everything follows. And this really is a good segue to Mr. Serra, I think. If you think about what the two speakers have mentioned, and to Emmanuel's point, is about private sector investment. I think in space exploration. So can you share, I think, a couple of sort of experience, and I take the ambassador's point, the two ambassadors, actually, ambassador from India, but also from Italy, that is not about, it's about us learning together. It's not about, somebody teaching the other person. So in that spirit, what lessons can we draw from India around private sector engagement?
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm Lochan Sehra, Secretary of the Space Regulator of India. It's called InSpace, Department of Space, Government of India. As our ambassador, Indian ambassador to Kenya, Madam shared in the morning, the policy initiative which have been taken by Government of India in last 2 years. She shared in the morning that, the revised space policy which allows, private sector to do anything they want to do from, right from building rocket to launching satellite to, creating space-based applications for societal benefits. Everything has been allowed. And the revised FDI policy which, help them to, get funding from different, sources. So for implement these policies, what 2-3 things which we have done as a regulator in last 1.5 years that I want to share, because the policies has been shared by Ambassador in the morning. So one thing is, which all the speakers has also highlighted, is collaboration between government and private sector. So what we have done is, the government agency here in India is ISRO. So in last 1.5 years or so, we have facilitated around 50 technologies transfer from ISRO to private sector, so that private sector can further develop these technologies and create more products. So that is number one. Number two is, since ISRO is working last 60 years, it has huge database. So that database has been provided to private sector companies to create value-added products. So that is number two. Number three is, like sir has also told, that PPP project. So what we have done is, ISRO has allowed private sector Indian companies to co-develop products. Like the next generation launch vehicle will be co-developed with private sector. So these are some of the initiatives which has created a robust private sector, space sector in India. And that you can see in the figures. Just 2 years before, there were hardly 6 startup and companies in private sector. As of now, it is more than 200. In the funding part also, just last year alone, private sector companies startup was able to generate around more than $138 million of US dollar of funding from different sources. So these are the initiatives which we have taken as a regulator to implement the policy which was created by the government. So in a summary, I would say that the cooperation and collaboration between all the stakeholders, first government, second private sector, and third is academic institutions. That will create the ecosystem to propel the space economy in any country. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's a big lesson to draw. I think even from government regulators in terms of how government goes simply beyond enabling policy, but proactively spinning out, basically, which is really a private sector term, spinning out initiatives into I've not had this in many ways. Spinning out things from government into private sector, and ensuring that there's an open collaborative framework to sort of encourage innovation simply beyond creating an enabling policy environment. I think I've got to understand to this point, I think you've heard all the speakers, from the openness of it to sort of how a government posture does it, to the investment in people and the gaps in research and development, and to what India is doing. I think to the point from the delegation, the EU Universal Infrastructure, some of us still use your space capability, whether it's ESA and the rest. What are the opportunities you see? And I know the EU has been quite known to invest in both in public sector and private sector. In this very young economy, how do we bridge that divide? Because it's not either or, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, let me just express gratitude for the invitation. Quite impressive, this whole conference and expo that has been the second one. We had the honor of having colleagues from the Kenyan Space Agency at the EU delegation here just a fortnight ago. And we could see that it's actually an agency that has a lot of drive and has a lot of ambition, so that's great. I'm working here in Kenya for 4 years, and we are not so active in space, I have to say, locally. However, on a global level, and let's say also a cooperation with the African Union, of course, we are active there with big programs like Copernicus, Galileo, and so on. You all know them. But I'm actually very pleased to see that member states are here. And we actually agreed that after this meeting here, we should actually meet bilaterally and see how we can actually join forces and so on. But I saw France, I saw the Czech Republic, and I saw, of course, also Italy and so on. And but just to revert to your questions regarding how do we bridge public and private interest and so on. Yeah, that's not an easy crack not to crack. And I think maybe sometimes it's interesting also to look at other sectors and so on, because space, of course, is new. And when we think about space, we all have this rocket launches and so on, but maybe we should look much more downwards, you know, that we have already a lot of satellites up there. Copernicus, just to promote them a little bit here, of course, that provide a lot of data. And what do we have an abundance of here in Kenya, as the colleagues are saying? We have a lot of bright-minded kids, students, and so on. If we could make basically get this data much more available for academia, for students, for private sector, I'm sure magic will happen. As we all know, Safaricom, why don't we dream big and have something similar in the coming years and so on? But we also have to be prudent and so on, because space is high risk and so on. Elon Musk is launching his rockets, and it's trial by error sometimes you have, where they are blowing up and so on. It's not all countries or big corporations who have that kind of funding and so on available. So it's all about risk. And here I strongly believe that a strong institutional anchor, you know, where the government is leading the way, maybe with some kind of a demonstration project. TIFA is definitely one that is showing that you can actually launch a rocket, not here from Kenya, but from I think it was Cape Canaveral. But Kenya is on the map, especially in Africa. That I think would have a lot of opportunity. Private sector is, to a large extent, risk avert. You don't get people to put their money, skin in the game, if they don't see there is actually a strong backing also from the government and so on. And I work in other sectors, especially in energy. There you have heard all about green hydrogen. It's you can't sometimes open the paper. There's a lot of risk also in that, and you need to cushion that risk in order to basically attract this kind of investment to Kenya. However, I also learned this morning, it's always good to learn something new, that Kenya, was it MIT or so, or whatever, I think it was you who said that, Ambassador, that Kenya has been basically assessed to be the best launch location in the world. That's a good start point, huh? So let's work on that. Thank you.
I promised you it will be 40 minutes to Mombasa in an hour flight. Mugo Kibati, I think this is where you come in. You had all this space, folks. Everybody says it's a new, I think for me, the sort of space 3.0 is a new bit, right, where space has been democratized. And I think we can draw parallels with the industry. I think this is 1990s, when the internet was just going to be opened. Can you share some insights from almost another industry that was almost at the same time in the 90s? And what are the key principles we can learn if we're to build this sector in a way that is inclusive, delivers public value, and leaves no one behind? Because I think that's really, is not space for private benefit, it's space for society benefit. And I think in those years, that's same questions I hear, so you can guess our age, is what we're grappling with, is how do we make the internet and technology more ubiquitous and more accessible?
Thank you, Ambassador, and let me also first begin by congratulating the board management chair and DG of KSA for putting out quite an impressive show second time round. We shouldn't take it for granted that we're sitting on this stage and having this discussion. And you know, I think, you know, as I segue into Ambassador Tigo's request of me, I just want to say that I think it was Emmanuel who talked about advocacy And what we must continue to do or start to do is more of this. The fact that you've convened this forum and brought all these stakeholders together is a fantastic start and must continue and must be enhanced. Also, the fact that we have the right kind of counterparties. You know, I think there are very few countries that could be better showcases to, say, Kenya and to Africa than India, for instance. I think we would have a lot more insights from a country like India than we would from one country that, you know, was launching atomic bombs in 1945. They're 2 way ahead of us, right? Or walking on the moon in 1969. I think having the right kind of collaborators to begin with, these are, as we march slowly, you know, and I'm also grateful that the EU and European counterparts have been very supportive. You talk about internet in the 1990s. That's, you know, interesting. That's really a long time ago. But I must say that I had an assignment when I was in college in the 90s to look at the diffusion of internet technology in developing nations. I actually did a paper for the ITU when I was in MIT ITU in 1999, and I can tell you we have come a very long way. At that time, in the late 90s, telemedicine, which Shireen spoke about, and thank you for the great keynote. Telemedicine was seen as futuristic use cases for the internet. You know, now we have them, and I think a lot of use cases have been given. You know, education, agriculture, and for me, now that we're talking about how do we engage private sector and how do we move from policy to impact, you made a comment which I want to take a little issue with about it's not supposed to be for private gain, it's for societal impact. We make a mistake. You have to combine both. The internet in the 90s, we were talking about societal impact. This is a great thing. You know, when the World Wide Web was created by Tim Berners-Lee and we grew in the 90s, we were seeing only positive potential for the internet. But what has happened since then? We now have both positive as well as significant concerns with the negative impact of the internet. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of the positive elements of the internet have been brought about by private gain. The fact that we have the ubiquity of internet and the uses today, whether it is in entertainment, you know, commercial, e-commerce, whatever you want to, whatever examples you want to give, it is because people who are looking for pure private gain, you know, the big OTTs, pushed innovations and research and development that was useful for society. But of course, because we didn't engage them properly, the negative aspects have not been properly regulated, frankly speaking. So let's not make the same mistake. I think it's important not to differentiate private gain with societal impact, because the biggest brains in the world, unfortunately, are what society needs, but they want to benefit from it. You talk about human capital, Ambassador Nkurunziza, and the fact that Kenya is at what, number 119, you said, and yet we pride ourselves in this country as one of the best human capital resources on the continent. But why are they so low in that particular factor is because they haven't seen the benefit in space. That is so done. We need to show them the private as well as societal benefit. And I think we need to mainstream the space sector for private sector. In other words, me running my retail, you know, my retail shop or bank or manufacturing facility or my agricultural production farm or value addition processing factory, I need to see, somebody needs to help me see the benefit of space in what I do day to day. It should not be seen as something separate. I think when you mentioned Elon Musk, that's all well and good, but we're not yet there on this continent. The reason why Elon Musk exists in the US is because, you know, In the US, they applied space technology to their mainstream sectors a long time ago. Now you have, sort of self-actualization projects like, let's go and live in the moon, in some other planet one day. What we need to do now, in my view, is to mainstream for private sector. Several years ago when I was charged with launching Vision 2030 in this country, one of the challenges I saw was how do we remove the notion from the Kenyan public that we are launching yet another government program, government project. Government is going to build stuff, and convince the public that Vision 2030 is everybody. It is you and me, government and the citizen, government and all various stakeholders. Only then, by mainstreaming it, can you have infrastructure development by government being leveraged by private sector and being leveraged as efficiently as possible. Finally, let me just close by saying we need, my challenge to the Kenya Space Agency, and they have a good start just a few weeks ago when you launched your 2023-27 strategic plan as part of medium-term plan for Vision 2030, the fourth medium-term plan, that a structured, systematic roadmap that is understood also by private sector is extremely useful and helpful in my view, because not only does it inform private sector what the plans are and where the involvement is, but feedback from the private sector also informs what KSA will be doing going forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Mugo, for those insights. And I think you're right. It's a false dichotomy. You can also do good and do business, and do business and do good. And I think that's what we're seeing in the space industry with the increased investment in space, that even now NASA has been enabled to go back to space even when they had stopped. Let me try and take a risk and ask for one question from the floor. Anybody? Going once? Going twice? You are very clear, or they did not understand anything we talked about. So it's either of those two. But I'll take it. Okay, let me take one very quickly here. Just one very quick one, because I was just worried. We've been talking to you from morning. Let's just try and get.
I have a microphone I am running with, do not worry.
Try and get this in. And just say who you're addressing it to.
Okay, thank you. My name is Neema Mutemi, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for the insights. So this week has been the headline has been the budget, and this question is actually open. I'd like to get, of course, Engineer Mugo Kibati's perspective, but also, it would be great to hear from the EU and India. How do we promote, because I think the sentiment we have from Kenyans is, what are we doing in space? This is not our priority. So how do we shift that, not just the narrative, but the perception in terms of, positioning the space sector as inclusive for everybody? In Kenya, the bottom-up economic model really talks about, the mamambogas and, the very low-level, businesses. How do we start to shift that conversation to rope them into it?
Thank you so much. I saw another one there. So how do we simplify, but also make space important for the everyday person, so they see that it's actually a priority to be invested in from the budget?
Hello, my name is Mike Onbaye. I'm representing Expertise France in this. So the question is, are there just for Philip Tego maybe, and the PS also, are there partnerships being developed with the private sector now that you're talking about democratization of geospatial data, to develop models such as subscription models where the private sector can access, or just the normal person can access quality geospatial data at a lower cost?
Thank you. Did I see a hand on the side? Cool. Oh, final one. Women are really kicking this one. Here. I saw a hand here. This side. So the cost, anybody, I'll take it, but anybody can take it also in terms of open data and how we can open data for private sector access and at low cost. Yes.
My name is Anastasia Wahome from the Alliance of Biodiversity in SEAT. My question directly goes to Dr. Nkurunziza. He heads a regional institution that has membership of 20 African countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. Looking at this session about bridging the gap, from policy to impact, maybe he can enlighten us on maybe a few examples of how the RCMLD is helping these countries to move from policy to impact on the geospatial side, because I believe that's one of the mandates of RCMLD, and I think any other person can also contribute to that. Thank you.
So much, and I'll close it there. At least we have public participation. We are constitutionally compliant. I think some questions are really direct, so if you can, maybe we start with Emmanuel, because yours seems to be 20-country question.
No. Thank you very much. I think the question she poses is pertinent to us, just as it would be for Kenya Space Agency in Kenya specifically. So the institution I had was set up almost 50 years ago, and its role was basically to support the 20 member states in Eastern and Southern Africa to harness the potential of Earth observation and space science in addressing different societal challenges. So we basically do that mainly through project implementation. We have several projects where we identify issues within these countries and either provide tools or advisory. So I can give several examples. One quick one is an early warning system that was set up for Malawi to help with the flooding that has been a problem there. So over the past 2 years, lives have been saved because of this community-based early warning system that was set up. So people are alerted in advance, and it's very easy to maintain. We've developed applications in different fields. One notable one, again, for demarcating and mapping land. Very quickly, you don't have to carry instruments to the field. You have your mobile application, you capture boundaries, they are sent directly to the portal. So I can go on and on. But the key thing is, as the theme of this conference states out, we need to listen to our constituents, who are the people, and understand the most pressing things, and also the most significant. Having agriculture and food security as one of the tracks that will be looked at this week answers that, for example, because all our countries are agriculture or agrarian economies. So I think a lot more can be done. We have more focused on applying what has been developed by other people, the data that is from other space agencies, and developing applications, which is a quick win. But I think going forward, we need to stand on our own feet and also be able to collect data, develop applications and services that are most relevant, rather than circulating what is coming from those who went before us. So I hope I just gave a simple example, but there is a lot more that we are doing, and the specific national agencies are also doing in the respective countries.
Thanks so much, Dr. Malala. I encourage you to visit the center. It's actually in Nairobi. I'm sure you know where it is. And he has an open door policy, and there's a lot you can learn from there, including survey and what survey does there. Mogo, I think there's a question to you around how do we show that it's important to invest in bread as it is important to invest in space.
Thank you. I'll attempt to address that question. First of all, by saying to the board and management of KSEC, don't be shy about talking to everybody all the time and getting into forum or fora where you can talk about what the Kenya Space Agency does. Don't be shy about it. I can tell you, when I was doing Vision 2030, I was never shy about talking about Vision 2030 and why it's important. The day you stop, it's forgotten. I think talking about the importance of the usual suspects, the critical things, real-time monitoring of, and disaster preparedness, I think, and given what we've just gone through in this country over the last 3 months, it shouldn't be too difficult to talk about the importance of disaster preparedness and explaining where, how space technology is useful to this. So that's one aspect, and that's what that's what the general public would expect to hear. But I think we need to go even further and begin to really educate the public about why this space technology space is important. I mean, who doesn't use Google Maps? Whether it is retail logistics today, citizens use it, right? They get their wares to their homes and from their homes to their markets through technologies that they don't understand, probably started somewhere in NASA. And we need to educate them that whether it is looking for markets, for cottage industries and for coffee farmers or tea farmers, whatever farmers, small value chain adders, to begin to make them understand that these technologies don't have to come from other parts of the world. We need to invest in them ourselves, and they're already using them, and their future, their own growth in the various economic sectors they're in depends on this space technology. The more we do that, you will find that there shouldn't be any argument about budgets for this space. And this is over and above what they expect. They expect to hear about real-time monitoring and disaster preparedness. They think it's important, but how much, they can quibble about how much should be spent on that. But once you get to their own lives, and and we get to make them understand that it's crucial to their lives today and to their future, then the debates on budgeting, I think, begin to reduce. And that is why what I was saying earlier about mainstreaming, what you're doing here with the private sector is going to be critical. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mungo. I think for me, I'll just add one point. The cost of not investing is more expensive. I think that's also something we need to show. I always call it the cost of inaction. Because imagine if we'd invested in data and geospatial information for disaster, would spend less money trying to come back or recover. The second thing I think for me, and to your point about data, I think it's not about government data being expensive. I think a lot of the satellite data Earth observations, especially the good quality ones, we know are held behind paywalls. Private sector have invested a lot of money. If you want 50 centimeters res, it's super expensive. I think there's a larger conversation, right? And this is something we're engaging through the ICT reforms in something we're calling data values. That we need to start engaging private sector in terms of assigning values to some specific data sets. If that data set has less economic value and more developmental value, then that data needs to be shared in a way that it can help developmental progress. If it has more private sector or more corporate value, more proprietary value, then I think we can come to an agreement on how that gets compensated, because it is an investment from that company. So I think that discussion is happening. We're coming up with a data governance council through the ICT reforms, and I think you will see that data is just not one specific aspect of space. I think data is a bigger facet in terms of how it's managed, and I'm really glad that Kenya is one of the countries that is leading into it. Being mindful of time, let me ask my panelists for their closing remarks. And then there's one thing you really need to come out of this panel. What would that be? Let's start from here and come out this way.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Thigo. One, I must compliment KSA for organizing this event, and it's a great eye-opener to many, and also congratulate them for being able to fill this hall with a niche topic like this. It's not so easy, and I know Ambassador Thigo was asking why people are not asking questions. We are all learning, and we want to thank you, Chairman and DG, for the good work. The other thing, a low-hanging fruit, which maybe you can collaborate with Mugo Kibati, is the government has an aggressive agenda for digitizing, and under the BETA program, Pillar 5, it's the digital superhighway and creative economy. We are there to provide 100 kilometers of fiber. But me and you know very well, fiber won't go everywhere. Why can't we leverage the Kenya Space Agency to provide connectivity through a consortium of telecoms and all that, like what you have in Teams, and be able to enable that village, and I don't choose Turkana because it's very remote, I've just seen as an example, that village deep in Turkana that can't have connectivity, they don't even have phone. First, start with a community network, grow it to join the superhighway, and that way, and that will be a low-hanging fruit for KSA, and we'll be able to support His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei's Ruto Bita program, and bring a lot of value to Mama Mboga. So that's what I say. The topic is very good, space technologies for societal benefits. Let's discuss how we can help society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lam.
Thank you. Mine is also to congratulate KSA on the strides made so far, and also commend the management, the board, for supporting the institution, because I think you are the bridge between them and the policymakers for them to understand how valuable it is to invest in this young institution. I also wish to bring to the attention of the people here of the other work that they have been watching the videos while I stayed here, that the agency is doing. As they grow, they are already providing services in crop yield monitoring, in many other things. So since we have our moderator here, Ambassador Tigo, I think we request you to push the case forward for more investment in the science particularly. I mean, we can run around with small things, applications here and there, but the long-term sustainability and identification of Kenya as a space country will come from developing the science and making sure we harness the demographic dividend of young people that we often talk about. Thank you.
I'll be the third in a row to say congratulations to the agency for launching this second session in our conference. And then I also want to state that data is actually quite important. Yeah? As access to cheap but also quality data is essential and so on. In my previous work before I came to lovely Kenya, I was working in Central Asia, disaster risk mitigation, and I there discovered that if you really want high quality data from what is available, it's actually very expensive, but you need it and so on. However, I think there's actually a lot of opportunity also in what is already freely available right now, Copernicus again, and other platforms and so on. And if that could actually be, let's say, be developed, be assessed, come up with some new ideas, African models, Africa systems, not only what is coming from US, Europe, other places and so on. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of skills out there. So, and then I took what I really heard so many times today, it's all about partnership. I can say now, it's the first time we take part in this from European Commission, European Union. We are looking very much forward to have continued discussions with the agency and see how we can actually enhance our bilateral cooperation and so on. Much of it is done by Brussels, but we are here local. We will make sure that we maybe can see how we can take this further. And then the last one, it's not about giving lessons, but learn lessons together. I like that one. It was one of the previous panelists who said that. So thank you very much for this excellent conference. Thank you.
So once again, thank you for the invitation to the board and management of KSA. I do want to pick up, with what Emmanuel has said about taking the team's concept. There's this fund that we as telcos contribute to. He knows about it, called the Universal Service Fund. And frankly speaking, sometimes some of the uses or utilizations that are suggested are not correct. Let me just say so. One would be for the space agency to discuss with the CA, how can you take advantage of that USF with the telcos to bring societal benefits, such as the example that was given. Right now I can tell you, as Telecom Kenya, we are talking to potential collaborators and partners who are not Kenya Space Agency on the potential of serving those far-flung areas through through airborne communications. Why should you be doing that and not with KSA? I want to say, as I close, that it's important that space technology become a central part of the discussion. We talk a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all the benefits that may accrue or we miss out on if we don't bridge the gap between this part of the world and the north. Space technologies are in the same, WhatsApp code, if I may say so, and they need to be tied with AI, the discussions on AI. Let me just say I'm happy as Telkom Telkom Kenya to continue supporting your work. And I say this from a selfish perspective, that we believe as Telkom Kenya that your success in this space technology space and in the discussions that I've had so far, especially about mainstreaming to the general population, private sector and general population, the importance and the significance and the fundamental nature of space technology, we will benefit. And I think your goal should be to have as many people in the private sector say selfishly, I want to collaborate with the Kenya Space Agency, because only in that sense are we going to be able to mainstream space technologies. When I first used, a GPS in the mid-90s in the US, I had no idea, there was some agency somewhere in satellite that was doing anything. I was just using it as a driver of a car. And so our border users, our retail people and the logistics, every morning people wake up looking for markets and they travel long distances and sometimes it's a hit and miss. And I think space technologies have the ability to reduce the risk of the hit and miss. Many of our people go through every morning from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. looking for markets. And I think the more people understand this, the more I think you will find a lot of private sector actors coming forward to help entrench space technologies. So thank you very much once again, and congratulations.
So thank you very much for the invitation from KSA. So I will just like to summarize that, the focus, first of all, should be on, the downstream, which is where the space applications are there, which very low investment you can find solution for so many socio-economic problems. I will just give one example of a startup in India. So the ISRO has created a database of EO data, which is called Bhuvan. And one startup from Ahmedabad called Nascent, they have created application for farmers for agriculture insurance based on that data. So that's how, in an application with a very, less investment, we can create solution for our socio-economic problems. That is number one. Number two is skill development for young generation for use of space technology. So in there, government has to work, international cooperation should also be needed. Like, next month we will be having a training program for Kenyan officials in India Institute of Remote Sensing in Dehradun for use of EO data. So that kind of, skill development and international collaboration will be needed to, fully use the space technology for socio-economic problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, and to my panelists, I'm not attempting to summarize this. I think clearly there's a couple of points that I picked from this conversation. One, I think its leadership and governance is important, whether it's from the examples of the European or India to the extent of providing an enabling environment, of course, from the amazing keynote from Shireen, is very much around leadership and governance. And I think that's important because that's how you trigger private sector investment. And to your point, Emmanuel, that's also how you begin to invest long-term in terms of human capital and collaboration, but also the issue of sustainability. I think that the issue of advocacy is increasingly becoming important. Sometimes we look at this conference as just a conference. I think it's important to continue to support these initiatives for advocacy, and I thank the sponsors who've been behind KSA. I hope the third one will be bigger than this one. I think this whole idea, and you're right, in terms of how do you activate downstream applications, but also downstream development of the things that Mugo is talking about. That border application will not be done by a big company, it will be done by a frugal innovator. And I think for me it's important now to unlock that, but I think that's where data comes in, is how do we ensure that we unlock the potential or the power of data in the hands of these innovators so that they can build those applications that speak to citizens. And when we talk about citizens, and to the point of Nema and what Mugo is responding, is that how do we make space real for citizens? It's good to talk about launching rockets, but it's good for them to see how it actually impacts their life. And DJ, I think you'll be happy with us because in the panel we've given you 2 business ventures. there's a Universal Services Access Fund, which now you have a window to, you can begin to tap in. But I think also Ministry of ICT saying we have a business opportunity. Can you come together as an industry to help provide connectivity beyond fiber? And with that, thank you very much, and I hand to my panelists.